Hello, hello, hello. Did you know that intermittent fasting can actually transform your health? Well, I've got an expert today, Cynthia Thurlow, who's going to tell us all about it. She is well known for intermittent fasting. So, Cynthia, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I've been really looking forward to our discussion.
Oh, I'm really looking forward to it as well. And I know my audience is going to get a lot out of this. So, really excited. So, I'm going to tell them a little bit about you by reading your bio. So, Cynthia Thurlow is a nurse practitioner, CEO, and founder of the Everyday Wellness Project. She's an international speaker. Now, listen to this, over 9.6 million views for her second TEDx talk on intermittent fasting, which is amazing. It's called Intermittent Fasting Transformational Technique. With over 20 years' experience in health and wellness, Cynthia is a globally recognized expert in intermittent fasting and nutritional health and has been featured on ABC, Fox 5, KTLA, CW, Medium, Entrepreneur, and The Megyn Kelly Show. She was listed in Yahoo Finance as one of the 21 founders changing the way we do business. Cynthia hosts the Everyday Wellness podcast, and which is considered one of the 21 podcasts to expand your mind in 2021 by Business Insider. Her mission is to educate women on the benefits of intermittent fasting and overall holistic health and wellness so they feel empowered to live their most optimal lives. Cynthia, I love that. I'm so impressed and very excited to get this conversation going today because you are a wealth of information on intermittent fasting, and the work that you're doing really is helping women becoming empowered in their health. So thanks so much for being here. And I'd like to start by asking you, why intermittent fasting? You've been a nurse practitioner, 20 years of
Mhm.
experience. I mean, I don't think people were talking about intermittent fasting 20 years ago. So, how did you come to zone in on intermittent fasting?
Well, I think the honest answer is when I was a new baby nurse practitioner in my 20s, I didn't really appreciate the physiologic changes that happen for women as they get older. And
Mhm.
I felt like there were many, many women, even in a busy cardiology practice, that were in their early 40s, mid 40s, late 40s, early 50s, that were really struggling. And I heard terms I didn't really understand. And obviously, I've always been an incredibly compassionate provider, but it was evident to me that there were missing links. And sometimes you actually have to go through the things that other people tell you about to then have a profound appreciation for their own experiences. And so for me in my early 40s, I worked for a very busy, very prestigious cardiology group in the Washington, D.C. area. Very proud to work for them. I was a wife. My husband did a lot of international travel. My boys were very young at that time. I probably was over exercising, not realizing it, not getting enough sleep. So wasn't doing enough self care. And I suddenly started thinking about things that women had said to me over the years that were finally really making sense. And so for me, coming to intermittent fasting was really a way to retool some of the things that I was doing. You know, I always have been a healthy eater. It wasn't about the food. And I kept saying, if all the things I used to do aren't working anymore, it's time to change it up. So I really came to intermittent fasting as a strategy for out of curiosity. And I remember I read Jason Fung's book, The Complete Guide to Fasting, and I felt a lot of alignment that if this is another traditionally Western medicine trained healthcare professional that's talking about it, then there's really something to it. And so that was my rabbit hole dive into intermittent fasting, not realizing that this is something I would then be known for. But I believe I was way ahead of the curve in terms of people that were talking about it, getting interested in it. And so as I started feeling better and feeling like my hormones were better balanced, et cetera, I started weaving that work into my private practice. You know, I had left clinical medicine in 2016 and almost immediately had a dedicated group of women that wanted to work with me because they too were finding that conventional Western medicine mindset about aging and women and hormones is really, it's like the wild, wild west. I think that there's a lot of focus on contraception and a lot of focus on childbirth and pregnancy and infertility and the postpartum period. And then in many ways, when women are done having children or they're close to that point, healthcare providers don't know what to do for them. The traditional kind of modalities are things like, well, we're going to prescribe synthetic hormones because that will control your symptoms. And then the next step up is they want to put devices in our bodies to control our symptoms. And I mean, like IUDs is a good example. And then if that doesn't work, then we're going to ablate your uterus. And if that doesn't work, then we just remove your uterus. And so, my mindset was always, maybe there's something more to this. Maybe it's not about controlling symptoms. Maybe it's about really understanding the physiology of women's bodies as they're getting older. Because one thing that I found when I was doing research on my first TEDx discussion, which was on perimenopause, was that, back in 100 years ago, women's life expectancy was the age that I was. It was 47 at the time I did my first TED Talk. And I remember, yeah, exactly. And I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, like I think I'm pretty young. Like this is, I was kind of completely stupefied. So how I'm going to circulate this back to your original question is that for me, I found that intermittent fasting was a path back to wellness. And for many of the women I was working with, they started feeling better and they were more encouraged to do. It's like the domino effect. If they could eat less often, then they can make better food choices. They could probably get better sleep quality. They might be more physically active. And so to me, it was the start of a domino effect. And that's why I think it's so important that healthcare professionals and health coaches and all of us are opening up these discussions so that good information can be shared with women, that they don't have to accept, that they just have to live as is. And I think that's unfortunately, I think that's the prevailing kind of allopathic medicine mindset, is that you just accept things as they are. This is just what happens with aging. This is just something we have to accept. And I cry BS. Like, I don't want any woman to not feel empowered at middle age and beyond. And so I feel like unknowingly this has become the platform in which I stand. And so I love being able to connect with your viewers and your followers to be able to encourage them to find answers. And that's really what it's all about, is empowering women to get the answers they deserve to have.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. And being a woman of that age, and a lot of people in my audience being women of that age, we're very interested in this, because I think, as you said, it's become accepted that, it's just normal to go through all this. And I think common, yes, but not normal. And I love the way, Cynthia, you got back at looking at root causes rather than masking symptoms.
Yeah.
Because we want to deal with the root causes so that we can, live our best lives and not be hampered by all the things that are, considered normal for our age. So I love all that. So let's talk about some of the things that well, first of all, let's talk about what intermittent fasting is, just in case there's some people listening that don't really know what intermittent fasting is. Could you just define it for us?
Absolutely. The way that I like to define it is, I say it's eating less often. And it's really eating within a period of time that you designate within your personal professional needs that works for you. So it may be that, the average American right now is eating anywhere from 10 to 16 times a day. And we can touch on what that does to the body, very negative things it does to the body. But we know when you're eating less often, so let's say you have 2 or 3 meals within 6 to 8 hours. If you're a teenage boy, you can probably eat 3 meals in 6 hours and be hungry in between. But let's be real. I have teenage boys in my house. That's why I feel like I can say that with absolute certainty.
Yeah.
But if you're a middle-aged woman or even a younger woman, eating within a compressed feeding window is a good thing. And so it might be that you have 2 or 3 meals. You may have 2 meals and maybe you have something smaller before you go to bed. And so on so many levels, this kind of mindset that we need to be snacking and eating mini meals has really eroded our health and has really created a cascade of metabolic syndrome and metabolic inflexibility. And that's why we're seeing such a profoundly unhealthy population. I always like to share the statistic. There was a UNC Chapel Hill study that was done in 2018. And it mentions that 88.2% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. This is completely unacceptable to me. what it tells me is we have so much work. You and I and all of these people in the health and wellness space have so much work to kind of get things back on track.
Yeah.
Because the profound net impact on having such an unhealthy population is it's not going to just impact our generation, it'll impact our children's generation, impacts our grandchildren's generation. And so eating less often and, making good food choices is really where it's really a starting point for many, many people. They may not be able to change their nutrition right up front, but just compressing the time frame in which you choose to eat has profound benefits that we don't talk enough about. Like I recall back when I was still in cardiology, which, as you can imagine, I'm seeing the most metabolically unhealthy population. They've already got disease. It's not even generally a preventative. It's curative. And I remember trying to have these conversations about not eating as frequently, making food changes. And we have unfortunately conditioned our patients to want a pill as opposed to doing the hard work. And so that's a lot of what I try to talk about is that, yes, the lifestyle piece is hard work up front, but the benefits it's a long game. It's not a race, it's a journey. And the benefits are so much more significant than if you just take another pill. And unfortunately, that's the direction that I think a lot of allopathic medicine is going, because we treat the symptoms, we are not addressing the root cause, and that can be problematic.
Yeah. So many people are looking for the quick fix. I really love the way you said it's about a journey, not, just popping a pill. So we've defined intermittent fasting. I think it's really important that what you've talked about there, the stressing that eating less often, like spreading out the meals, because I remember being told for years, oh, grazing is so good. And you need to eat frequently to keep your metabolism up. I mean, what a backwards way of thinking. Okay. So let's get into now the benefits. I know you've talked about some. Obviously, we're going to help with women's health. Let's talk about those, break them down a little bit. So first of all, lose weight. Let's talk about that one.
Well, I think a lot of women, most women, come to intermittent fasting out of a curiosity. They want to change body composition. They want to lose weight. And yes, that is definitely one of the benefits, but there's so much more. What really keeps people fasting is how good they feel. So yes, weight loss, but if you look at the research, women take a little longer to lose weight than men. A lot of that is hormones, and a lot of times it's cycling hormones, and we'll touch on that, I'm sure, during our discussion. I also think about the fact that when we're eating less frequently, our insulin levels are low, and our body is able to tap into a special type of ketones, and there's the technical term is called beta hydroxybutyrate. It crosses the blood-brain barrier. So women will say to me, oh my gosh, I have so much mental clarity. And that is courtesy of your insulin levels being low and your body being able to tap into fat as a fuel source. It is the preferred fuel source in the body because we get a lot of energy out of it. Next is energy, tons of energy, because our body is using a preferred source of fuel as opposed to sugar or glycogen or glucose. And
it's just more efficient.
Right. And it's not to suggest that, if you're being chased by a wild animal, you need some glucose because that's going to give you that quick energy. But to sustain your energy, you need to tap into fatty acids and ketones. Next is it lowers our risk of developing certain types of neurodegenerative disorders. I think about Parkinson's. I think about Alzheimer's. Any woman that's listening that is in menopause, 12 months without a menstrual cycle, you need to be concerned about buffering the loss of estradiol and brain function. There's a really great book called XX Brain. I refer just about everyone to this book. When they tell me I'm afraid of taking hormones in menopause, I always say, read this book and then really have a good discussion with your healthcare professional. So neurodegenerative disorders, that's super important, especially as I'm talking about metabolic inflexibility in the United States in particular, and the fact that we know women's rates of Alzheimer's go up exponentially. And I really think of it as type 3 diabetes. So as women get older, they become physiologically more insulin resistant, more likely to develop Alzheimer's. Next, we think about certain types of cancer risk go down profoundly. And we think that some of that may be attributable to kind of a key nerdy science term that is associated with intermittent fasting called autophagy. So it's this waste and recycling process that goes on in the body when we're not eating. It's not to suggest that autophagy is one of these things that gets turned off per se, and then mTOR gets turned on. It's that there's waxing and waning. And we know that our body is able to get rid of these disease disordered cells when we're not eating. So really, really important, especially as it pertains to cancer risks. We want to make sure we get rid of cells that would otherwise could potentially go on to do and be things that we don't want. Those are usually where I start, but I also talk about growth hormone. When we're not eating, we get spikes of growth hormone. I just think there's so many profound benefits, but a lot of where the benefits really stem from have a lot to do. Sorry, it was like everything comes through my iMac. My apologies.
No worries.
But everything, ultimately comes down to balancing hormones. So we know it has a positive impact on cortisol, provided you're doing it the proper way. Blood sugar, insulin can be very helpful for managing and mitigating our sex hormones. And so obviously it goes on a case-by-case basis, but the benefits are endless. But those are usually the ones that people are most interested in hearing and knowing about. And lastly, I want to just mention, I can't tell you how many women and men for that matter that have reached out and have said, I got off my blood pressure medicine, I got off my diabetes medication, I needed less cholesterol medication just because they eat less often. And that to me is really, really powerful. If there's someone that's watching or listening and says, hey, I want to be on less medication, this is definitely something worth discussing with your healthcare professional.
Yes. Fantastic. And so we've talked about the balancing the hormone, losing the weight, balancing the hormones, lowering risk of different illnesses, having more energy, and also the slowing the aging process, which kind of goes along with all that. But I know that a lot of people in my audience have pain and inflammation like I do. And for me, intermittent fasting has really been a game changer with that. So have you seen that in your clinical practice as well?
I have. And, a lot of it has to do with when we're eating less often, there are a lot of restorative properties that can be tapped into. There's something called the migrating motor complex in the gut that helps, with detoxification in the gut. And that's not just a term that the wellness industry uses. That is an actual process that it goes on in our bodies every single day if we really tap in intrinsically. But I think it really speaks to gut health, and it really speaks to, autoimmune risk. I know that is huge with your audience, as I myself have healed myself from 3 different autoimmune issues with intermittent fasting. So I do take that really seriously. And the inflammation can be a byproduct of meal frequency. It can be a byproduct of the foods that we're choosing to eat and stress management. And so when we're eating less often, it allows our bodies to kind of quiet inflammation. But there's also that huge nutritional piece, which I know that you probably speak on with some tremendous frequency. But yes, I do see quite a reduction in inflammation, and a lot of the inflammation that I see, tied in with the things I just touched on, can also be improved upon by making sure insulin levels are low and that your blood sugars are within healthy limits. Because what I unfortunately see quite often in our given society is just rampant insulin resistance and rampant, low grade inflammation that goes on related to lifestyle and nutritional intake.
Cynthia, would you say it's accurate to say that every time we eat, we're challenging our immune system?
Potentially. I think about, and this is interesting that we're having this conversation right now. I was just saying to a client before I jumped on with you, she wanted to take an over-the-counter Metamucil or fiber product. And I was trying to explain to her why I'm not a fan of these products. And I'll share this with your listeners as well, that most conventionally grown wheat in the United States or conventionally grown grains are sprayed with a pesticide called glyphosate. I know outside the United States, they do a much better job protecting consumers than they do here in the United States, but it's relevant because this is how you can create small intestine hyperpermeability, aka leaky gut, where you can actually, this very thin layer within the small intestine, you can actually leak food particles, things you consume that maybe are otherwise healthy. You can leak these food particles into your bloodstream, and that can develop a degree of inflammation that can, then lead to food sensitivity. So I absolutely do see that. Unfortunately, I think a lot of people still don't make that connection that what is done to our food before it ends up on our plate or before in our grocery store has a large net impact. And this is why a lot of people are very sensitive to wheat and to grains, yet they don't want to pay attention to the bloating and the weight gain and the things because they have to rethink their meals. But when really explaining, like, you are ingesting a toxin, same thing with corn here in the United States. It's grown with an insecticide. And this is why I'm not a huge, I like corn, but I don't recommend that we eat corn regularly, but there are corn derivatives in almost all of the processed foods. And so we're getting an onslaught constantly if we're consuming hyper palatable, highly processed foods, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just moving to eating real food, real vegetables, and also people don't realize that the protein, animal protein that they're eating, the animals are fed these products as well, and then it gets into their system, and we eat what we ate, so we can get it that way as well. So it's educating people, and as you said, it's people. There's a lot of money spent on making people like food, food products, and so it's really hard for people to make the changes. I mean, once you get ill, of course, there's motivation there to try to make a change, but it's too bad that people have to get ill first.
Right. Well, and I think there's also a degree of cognitive dissonance that, people are just like, I can't go there. And so respecting where people are on their journey, if they can change one thing at a time and do it slowly, I think that's really much more important, because if someone listens to you or I, and we do a lot of things to maintain our health, it seems overwhelming. Like, I loved your videos when you would, get in the middle of, a Canadian winter, you would get in freezing cold temperature. I was like, wow, I'm not going to complain about my 1 minute cold shower ever. But it's realizing we're all on our own path and our own journey. So if you're watching this and thinking like, there is no way I can go more than 12 hours without eating. Well, start with day one and just kind of plug along. But I agree with you that food manufacturers make it challenging for people to, kind of reroute themselves. If they've been eating a hyper palatable, highly processed diet, it can be very challenging to make those changes.
I'm a big fan of just encouraging meal planning. Just when you plan, you generally make better decisions. And as you said, the little baby steps. So maybe you just start with planning, 3 meals.
Right.
Just plan 3 meals and go from there. But the baby steps of the intermittent fasting. So, start with perhaps trying to not eat after supper. Just start with that and, go from there. But I it's so good. I love this. So, okay. Are there any specific issues for women in terms of intermittent fasting? Do we respond differently than men? Is there a way we should approach it differently?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And this is where, my book, it was really a passion project, not realizing I would be, that when I did that second talk, that it would then lead to a lot of opportunities. We are not many men. We are not lab animals. We have to approach fasting differently because our physiology is different. I do think that menopausal women and men are more aligned in that their hormones are a little more consistent. So yes, women, especially cycling women, have to look at fasting strategically. I think menopausal women need to look at fasting strategically to have success. And I address a lot of these things in the book specific to this, but there are very few of us in the space talking about the unique needs of women. We just can't go about fasting in the same way. And it's not to suggest that we can't have success and we can't lose weight and we can't, garner and embrace all of those, amazing benefits of fasting. We're just a little more complicated. And so I say that in the most loving way. Exactly. We are. And so I tell people all the time, I despise the fear mongering that I see from people who I truly believe are probably well-meaning. But if you look at thousands and thousands, not just people I've worked with, but lots of other healthcare professionals that are out there, to suggest that somehow women can't fast. And there are specific instances where they shouldn't, but to suggest that women shouldn't fast and can't gain benefits from it, I think is really unfortunate, because there are probably maybe women who even know that follow you that, may have been told before that, you can't, fasting, you can't do fasting if you're a woman, and certainly not if you're getting a menstrual cycle. But I always say there are very few contraindications. That's what we call it in traditional allopathic medicine, reasons why you should not fast, or instances when you should not fast. And those are fairly small, but I think the average person, if they're on medication, chronically, talk to your healthcare professional. It may just be that you need to be monitored more closely. Maybe you're going to check your blood sugar more frequently. Maybe you're going to have your blood pressure checked more frequently so that, they can stay attuned to changes that are going on. But the average person, there's so many benefits. And, that's part of this platform, is just making the awareness known so that people can continue to make good choices.
Great point about talking with your healthcare professional. Because I know when I started changing the way I ate, my husband just kind of went along as well. And he was on blood pressure medications, and all of a sudden he was like getting kind of woozy.
Yeah.
He kept on having low blood pressure. So he had to work with his doctor, and eventually he tapered off. He's totally off them, which is amazing. And, not surprising, right? You and I know that's not surprising. So I'm glad you brought up your book. So your book is Intermittent Fasting Transformation, the 45-day program for women to lose stubborn weight, improve hormonal health, and slow aging. And I know it's not available yet. It's not coming out till March, right? March 15th.
But you can pre-order the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Target and other bookstores. So yeah.
Right. I got a link for that, and I'm going to put that up right now. There we go. Right? So CynthiaThurlow.com.
Yep. And
and that will take you there. So you can pre-order the book, and it's always fun when you pre-order because there's little surprises and things that come up. So that's great. Okay. And I want to, first, we've only got a few minutes left, and I want to respect your time and everyone's time. So I want to say thanks, first of all, for the people that have joined. I know we've had some people watching live. Some people are going to watch the replay. Some people will be listening to the podcast. So I'd love to hear any comments. If you got any questions, put them in. Peggy says hello. So thanks very much for joining live, Peggy. And Marie Lundringen, yep, can't wait to pre-order, she says. So that's wonderful. Thanks so much for watching. Now, Cynthia, people can find you on your website, which is CynthiaThurlow.com. Margie's here too. Rowena's here too, says very informative.
Oh, good.
And Margie says, interesting. Thanks, ladies. And so your podcast is called Everyday Wellness, which is a fantastic podcast. And Facebook, you can find her Facebook page is CHT Wellness, Instagram Cynthia_Thurlow. But I'm going to put all those links in the notes so people can find you, Cynthia. But I've always got, Carol says hi too. I've always got one last question. They're really enjoying this, I'm sure. One last question that I always ask, and that is, what's one action someone could take today to improve their health? What would you say, Cynthia? Out of all the things.
Well, I think my standard canned response is eat less often. But in the context of this conversation, I would say really focusing on sleep quality, because women north of like 40 oftentimes start struggling with sleep quality. They wake up at night, they have trouble falling asleep. So really digging deep to determine what is the root cause for why your sleep is so poor. Sometimes it's hormonal, sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's macros. Obviously, I do a ton of content around sleep. And this is, for many people, it's the missing link for why they can't lose weight. In fact, I just did a webinar last week about this because I get asked it so frequently. So I would say really focusing on high quality sleep and creating a sleep hygiene, just like when we have babies and little kids and we do things to let their bodies know it's time to go to sleep. We have to kind of reinstitute those things. And if you were speaking to me in the evening, I would have blue blockers on. And if, during the daytime, I'll give you an example. One of the first things I do every morning is I get up and I get light exposure without sunglasses on, because that reminds my body it's time to get up and get moving. And so just little changes have a big impact on sleep quality. So I would say focusing on really good quality sleep. And the statistics show, and it's a very small percentage of people that have a genetic SNP that makes them need less sleep, but they still need 6.25 hours. The average person needs 7 to 9 hours a night of sleep, and most women are not getting it.
And when you say sleep, you're talking about actual sleep, not time in bed, right?
Correct. Because a lot of times people sit in bed and they're on their iPads and they're on their phone and they're maybe on their laptop or they're watching TV. And I'm not suggesting that, we all have those things, but time in bed should really be for either sex or sleep. That's really what it should be for.
I've heard people say the 3 S's: sex, sleep, and sick.
Yep. Yep.
So yeah, I know so many people don't realize that every time they look at that blue screen, they are just, stopping sleep in its tracks. Really, the production of melatonin, I believe, stops when we look at those screens. So yeah, I was looking for my blue light blockers. I had them on last night because I've had a little bit of trouble sleeping lately.
Yeah. No,
And
most
yeah.
people see them on me, and I actually have a pair that helps with eye strain. So these aren't blue blockers. These are designed to be worn during the daytime in front of computers. And it helps with eye strain because a lot of the artificial light that we get from our electronics can ultimately be damaging to our vision. So,
Mhm. So people may not have realized that, Cynthia, what you said about
Mhm.
when you're not sleeping as well, that can be a reason for you not losing weight.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I do. Yeah,
Interesting connection there. So,
absolutely.
Cynthia, thank you so much
Welcome.
for being here today. Like, what a great conversation we've had. I know, really eye-opening for the listeners, and I'm sure they're going to be motivated to look further into intermittent fasting if they're not doing it already, and also find out more about the ins and outs of it by reading your book. So thanks so much for being here and for your time today. And thank you for everyone watching and listening.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take care, everyone. Bye.